In Bhopal, the difference between life and death was the wind. For years, the wind usually blew from the east to the west, away from the city and toward the open fields. But on the night of December 2nd, 1984, nature turned against the people. The wind shifted. It began blowing south, directly into the slums. Aziza, a survivor who lived near the factory, remembers waking up not to silence, but to a sound she will never forget. It wasn't a siren. It was thousands of people screaming one word in the darkness: Bago, run. She opened her door and saw a white cloud rolling over the ground. It wasn't drifting up. It was hugging the earth, looking for people sleeping on the floor. When she took a breath, she said it didn't feel like air. It felt like she was breathing in fire. This wasn't a natural disaster. This is the story of a city that was turned into a gas chamber while it slept. And the men who did it, they didn't just walk away. They were flown home on private jets. I am James Tudor, and this is the archive of the night the air turned to poison. 2 years before the sky fell, a man named Rajkumar Keswani tried to scream. He wasn't a scientist. He was a journalist for a small local newspaper. He had been watching the massive American factory that loomed over his city, the Union Carbide pesticide plant. It was a symbol of the Green Revolution. It promised to save India from famine. It promised jobs. But Keswani saw something else. He saw leaking pipes wrapped in duct tape. He spoke to workers who told him about the minor accidents that were hushed up with a few rupees. In 1982, he published a headline that should have stopped everything. He wrote, "Save, please, save this city." A few weeks later, he wrote another, "Bhopal is sitting on the edge of a volcano." He sent these articles to the chief minister. He sent them to the Supreme Court. He sent them to Union Carbide's headquarters in America. Do you know what the response was? Silence. Actually, it was worse than silence. It was reassurance. The state government told the people of Bhopal, "Carbide is a gift. Do not fear the hand that feeds you." But inside the factory, the gift was rotting. To save money, the American executives had ordered a series of budget cuts that are hard to believe even 40 years later. They fired the safety supervisors. They cut the staff in half. And then they made the decision that sealed the city's fate. The chemical they were making, methyl isocyanate, or MIC, is unstable. It wants to explode. To keep it safe, it must be kept at 0 degrees Celsius. But the refrigeration unit cost $70 a day to run. $70. Carbide decided that was too expensive. So they turned the fridge off. For months, 42 tons of liquid death sat in tank 610, slowly warming up, waiting for a spark. The spark came from a garden hose. On the evening of December 2nd, a worker was ordered to clean a pipe. It was a routine job. You flush the pipe with water to clear out the gunk. But this factory was broken. The safety valves that were supposed to stop the water from entering the chemical tanks were leaking. They hadn't been replaced in years. The water slipped past the valve. It traveled down the rusty pipes, and it poured directly into tank 610. When water hits methyl isocyanate, it triggers a violent runaway reaction. Think of it like dropping a match into a tank of gasoline, but slower. Inside the tank, the temperature skyrocketed. The liquid turned into gas. The pressure gauge, which usually sat at 20 psi, swung past 50, then 60, Then it broke the needle. Under the concrete slab of the factory floor, the earth began to rumble. The workers in the control room heard it. They saw the concrete cracking. They ran to the alarm system. But remember, the budget cuts, the gas scrubber, a shower system designed to neutralize the poison, was in standby mode. There was no backup. There was no safety net. At 12:30 a.m., the safety valve on tank 610 blew open. A geyser of white gas shot high into the Indian night sky. The wind caught it, and the massacre began. While the city slept, Ghulam Dastagir was awake. He was the deputy station master at the Bhopal railway station. He stepped out onto the platform to check the signals, but the air tasted like blood. His eyes started to burn. He fell to his knees, choking. He didn't know what was happening, but he looked down the tracks. The Gorakhpur Express was pulling in. It was carrying hundreds of passengers. Dastagir tried to signal, but it was too late. The train slowed down. The brakes screeched, and it came to a halt right alongside Platform 1, right inside the gas cloud. It didn't pass through safely. It became a metal coffin. The gas seeped through the open windows of the carriages. Passengers who had been sleeping peacefully woke up choking. They tried to run for the doors, but they collapsed in the aisles. Within minutes, the train was silent. Dastagir realized he couldn't move the train, but he knew more were coming. The Kushinagar Express was barreling toward Bhopal. The Punjab Mail was on its way. If they entered the station, thousands more would die. Dastagir made a choice. He stayed in the cloud. He scrambled to the control room, his lungs filling with fluid, and started frantically calling the neighboring stations. "Stop the trains," he rasped. "Do not let them enter Bhopal. Everyone here is dying." He managed to stop the other trains miles outside the city. He saved thousands of lives with those calls. But for the people on the Gorakhpur Express, he did what he could. He spent the rest of the night running from carriage to carriage, dragging survivors out of the gas, pouring water on their eyes, and watching his staff die around him. He worked until he collapsed. He survived the night, but he spent the rest of his life in agony, his lungs destroyed. He died a few years later, a hero who stood his ground when the air turned to poison. By sunrise, the gas had dissipated, but it left behind a landscape that looked like the apocalypse. People had run in panic, but because they were blind, they ran in circles. They died in piles. Whole families lay dead in their beds, looking like they were just sleeping, except for the white foam around their mouths. The hospitals were a war zone. Doctors were overwhelmed, but the tragedy is that they were helpless. Union Carbide had treated the chemical formula of MIC as a trade secret. They hadn't told the local hospital what the antidote was. So, while 20,000 people gasped for air in the corridors, the doctors could only give them eye drops and cough syrup. If they had known to simply give them sodium thiosulfate, thousands might have lived. But the trade secret was more important than the patients. 3 days later, a private jet landed in Bhopal. Out stepped Warren Anderson, the CEO of Union Carbide. He was an American aristocrat. He wore a suit. He looked concerned. The Indian police arrested him immediately. He was charged with culpable homicide. It looked like justice was finally happening. But then the phone rang. It was a call from New Delhi. Pressure from the American embassy. Let him go. 6 hours after being arrested, Warren Anderson was released on bail for 25,000 rupees, about $2,000. He was driven to the airport in a government car. He got on his jet and he flew home to the United States. He never returned. For the next 30 years, the Indian courts demanded his extradition. They called him a fugitive, but the U.S. government refused to hand him over. Warren Anderson lived the rest of his life in a luxury home in the Hamptons. He played golf. He went to dinner parties. He died of old age, a free man, while the people of Bhopal were still coughing up blood. Eventually, Union Carbide paid a settlement, $470 million. It sounds like a fortune, but do the math. Divided by the 500,000 people poisoned, it came out to about $500 per person. $500 for a lost child, $500 for a lifetime of blindness. Today, the factory still stands. It hasn't been torn down. It hasn't been cleaned up. It is a rusted, overgrown tomb in the middle of the city. And inside, the chemicals are still there. When the monsoon rains come, the water washes through the buried waste. It seeps into the ground. It flows into the wells where the poorest people still drink. Children born in Bhopal today, 40 years later, are born with twisted limbs and damaged brains. The gas is gone, but the poison remains. The wind still blows through Bhopal. And if you listen closely, it doesn't just sound like wind. It sounds like a warning. I am James Tudor. This is Empire Archives. Subscribe.